The Occoquan Radio Podcast is a private production and is not affiliated with the town of Occoquan. Opinions expressed on the podcast are solely those of its host and guests. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 19th, 2025 episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Ernie Porta, bringing you 10 to 15 minutes of irregular, unscheduled updates on things Occoquan and beyond. This episode will cover a few town updates. In our history segment, discuss the anniversary of the mill fire of October 19th, 1924, which ended the long history of milling operations in Occoquan. Clarify the role of the mill house, the site of our museum, in the rumor mill shredder entry, and close with upcoming activities in town. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. I want to start our town updates this episode by congratulating Ghang Waan Thai restaurant located at 416 Mill Street. They held a ribbon cutting Sunday that featured some truly excellent food. If you have not checked them out, you really should. We're grateful that they chose to locate in Occoquan. At the upcoming town council meeting this week, two items look to dominate the agenda. One concerns some proposed changes to this town's sign ordinance, which would, among other things, allow colored strings of lights in the historic district outside the current period on a temporary basis and with a permit. And that would also increase the number of A-frame signs allowed and permit one of them to be off-premises under certain conditions. The other main item on the agenda is consideration of a special parking district in one small street in town outside the historic district to address parking concerns expressed by that community. This episode seems like an appropriate one to note in our history segment that 101 years ago today, at around 7 p.m. on the evening of Sunday, October 19th, 1924, a fire began that destroyed the Occoquan Merchants Mill, which had been in operation since approximately 1790. The fire also severely damaged our current Millhouse Museum building, which was attached to the mill itself and served as its office. The Janney family had operated the mill for almost 100 years, dating to when Joseph and John Janney purchased it from Nathaniel Ellicott in 1826. In fact, for much of the 19th century, the wider Janney family owned and operated an expansive mill complex in Occoquan that at times included multiple grist mills of both the merchant and country toll mill variety, a plaster of Paris mill, a sawmill, and a cotton mill or factory. For those who might be unaware, a merchant's mill is a commercial enterprise where the operator purchases grain for their own account and grinds it for sale, while a country toll mill is one where local customers bring grain to be milled and the operator keeps a portion of the grain as the miller's toll or payment for the service. By the time of the fire, only the large merchant's mill remained in operation, and the Janney family no longer actually owned it, having sold it in 1899 to a northern syndicate. Tyson Janney, however, was still leasing the mill from the syndicate, and it was run by his sons H.M. Janney and J.B. Janney. The fire originated next door in the old country toll mill, which at the time was no longer operating as a mill, but was the home of the Occoquan Electric Light and Power Company, which had been established in 1921, and which an account from 1976 asserts was founded by Harvey and Douglas Janney and Fred M. Lynn. As you may recall from the Rumor Mill Shredder segment of an earlier podcast episode, an oral history from a resident interviewed in 1980 and reported on in the December 2005 issue of the Occoquan Historical Society's newsletter recounts how, quote, along about 1924, the town had a little power plant there that furnished the town its electricity, and Mr. Austin Barbie, who at the time the interviewee says was still living in Manassas, had charge of getting the motors running that made electricity. He went in there one night, they wouldn't start. So he used some kind of high-powered fuel to get them going, and it set the whole thing on fire. Well, of course, that ruined the power plant right quick, and it worked on over into the old mill and burnt out the interior of that so it could no longer operate. End quote. As we noted in the earlier podcast, the problem with this account is that poor Austin Barbie, who was blamed for the incident, actually wasn't at the plant to start the motors. According to contemporaneous newspaper accounts, the man in charge of the plant, Mr. Barbie, did not arrive at the usual time, and waiting for him, two boys without any authority undertook to start the plant with the aid of gasoline. Quote, "A match was struck," end quote, the news accounts read. Quote, "The gasoline fumes ignited and quickly spread, enveloping the engine and woodwork. The boys were too terrified to put out the fire or to give the alarm until the blaze had gained considerable headway." End quote. So, two unnamed boys, not Mr. Barbie, started the fire. But regardless of how the fire started, without any fire apparatus in town, since there was no town fire department at the time, residents turned out and formed bucket brigades to fight the fire. One newspaper said, quote, "Practically the entire male population of the village," end quote, turned out for the bucket brigades. Another said the brigades were, quote, "composed of all the available persons in the little town," end quote. The fire turned out to be too much for the bucket brigades, and Columbia Engine Company No. 4 of Alexandria was called. By the time the Alexandria firemen arrived, however, quote, "both buildings were under control of the flames and the men concentrated their work on checking the flames," end quote. Thanks to the efforts of the residents and firemen, the fire did not spread as it had almost a decade previously during the town fire of 1916. All electrical power was shut off, of course, and a newspaper reported that residents were using oil lamps and candles to light their homes. The damage caused by the fire was valued at $50,000 to $60,000, which would be approximately $1 million in 2025 terms. Some wheat and corn and some of the machinery owned by Tyson Janney and valued at approximately $8,000 was believed to be insured. But the building and most of the machinery owned by the Northern Syndicate, valued at approximately $50,000, was not insured. According to the newspapers, the owners of the property did not contemplate rebuilding the mill. They, of course, did not, and so ended the long history of milling operations in Occoquan. I encourage everyone who is interested in learning more about Occoquan history to visit Occoquan's Millhouse Museum and consider joining the Occoquan Historical Society. You can find more information at www.occoquanhistoricalsociety.org. That's the intro sound for our Rumor Mill Shredder segment. This is where we pay homage to the fact that while for much of its history Occoquan was a prosperous mill town, the only mill in operation today is the rumor mill. Here we take on urban legends, myths, rumors, or other similar topics that need straightening out. Given our discussion of the mill fire of 1924, this seems like an appropriate episode to once again address the myth that the mill house, where the Occoquan Historical Society currently operates the Millhouse Museum, was at one time the house of the miller at the merchant's mill. That is not the case. The mill house, as it has come to be known, was believed to have been built as an attachment to the merchant's mill sometime around 1820. It served as a storage room and office for the mill operators. There is no substantive evidence to indicate that anyone ever lived there as their primary abode, despite the understandable confusion that the name mill house may convey. Now for upcoming events this week. On October 23rd, Laura Jones Fine Art Gallery will be holding one of their oil painting classes at 6 p.m. And on October 24th, from 4 to 6 p.m., Leaf and Petal will hold their Friday night flights of curated teas. But the big events this weekend in town are our collection of Halloween-themed activities. They begin on Friday, October 24th, with the murder mystery event in Rivermill Park beginning at 7 p.m. entitled Murder on Prom Night, which will feature a healthy helping of 80s nostalgia. The next morning at 10 a.m., the town will hold our annual family-friendly Occoquan costume parade and contest, which features a parade down Mill Street to Rivermill Park, where costume folks can participate in a contest for the best costumes in various categories. Then, that evening in Rivermill Park, the town will host a showing of the movie Hocus Pocus. Tickets are $5, and ages 8 and under are free. There will also be freshly popped popcorn, candy, snacks, water, soda, and beer and wine for sale. Last that weekend, on Sunday, October 26th, from 5 to 7:30 p.m., Madigan's Waterfront Restaurant will host a murder mystery dinner with the Foul Players of Perryville. For more information on these and other events in Occoquan, go to www.visitoccoquanva.com/events. Again, that's www.visitoccoquanva.com/events. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. I'm your host, Ernie Porta. Thank you for listening.